Spotlight is a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. It seeks to spotlight people, places, and events from around the Diocese of Youngstown that promote the new gospel of joy called for by Pope Francis. Your program host is Father James Korda.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight. I'm Father Jim Korda. During this series, we're going to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Diocese of Youngstown. And joining me in today's show is Joe McKarns. Welcome to our show.
Hello, and glad to be here.
You know, I was really excited about you coming for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is because I think you have a wonderful history to share, not only personally, but also as your parish is concerned. We know that your parish is the oldest parish, not only in the Diocese of Youngstown, but really in all northern Ohio.
The northern part of Ohio, yes.
So let's talk about your parish and give us a brief history about it.
Well, Father Fenwick would have said the first Mass, and now in 1817 is when he said the Mass that established it as a parish, at that time under the name of St. Paul's. Mm-hmm. And later, since as time went on, it was St. Philip's. But back in his day, we actually fell under the Diocese of Bardstown, Kentucky.
Oh, okay.
And then when the state of Ohio was actually formed or whatever, then it was the Diocese of Cincinnati for several years. And then it was the Diocese of Cleveland. And then here in 1943, then the Youngstown Diocese. Those are our jurisdictions of how we come through. So that in itself is quite an interesting legacy, I think.
You know, it's interesting that kind of evolution, when you look back to the roots of a place, it kind of tells you a lot about it. And the parish itself, I'm sure that over these years since it's been part of the Youngstown Diocese, the 75 years, has evolved as well. In your affiliation with the parish, how have you seen the parish and the church change?
Well, probably I didn't come along till 1959, and I hate to say this, but I originally grew up and went to St. John's in Summitville. That was my home parish as a child. And then in probably like the 1980s or thereabouts, then I started to go into Dungannon, and at that time lived at Guilford Lake. So, and yes, the congregation has kind of shrunk a bit. There's still dedicated people in place, and we're still there. And I guess what I want to do is I want to do what I can to help continue, make known and our history that we have, because, you know, in essence, we are the oldest parish, and I shouldn't say the oldest parish, I got to clarify this, the oldest continuing parish congregation, not the oldest parish building, not the, you know, that kind of stuff, but it's the oldest parish, I'm getting mixed up here.
But that's a legacy, really, when you think about it, for all of these many years, that your parish has been part of that. What does that tell you when we find ourselves now, at least personally, celebrating 75 years as a diocesan church? What does that say to you personally as a Catholic?
I want to help continue this and keep it going. I want to keep things alive. I'm very devoted myself, and with the Knights of Columbus and all, so I try my best to keep things going.
We've got a few minutes left of our time in our first segment. We know that in the recent past, St. Philip Neri celebrated its 200th anniversary as a diocesan parish with a big celebration at a midnight mass with the bishop. Tell us briefly about that celebration and why it was significant.
Why it's significant is because in the Church of St. Philip Neri, which is where we're at now, which is just at the top of the hill from where the cabin's at, not originally, but what the significance of that is, that's 200 years from the day one, which started in the cabin, till now, 200 years later. And that in itself is, if we don't keep this alive, us, right now, then it's lost for future generations. So we try to keep it alive and keep it going so that we can continue on, or the younger people have a heritage to go to. And I will open myself up to tours and the like of people, just a few or a busload come down. I'll take the time and show them around and get them personally involved in our history.
It's interesting. We here at CTNY had an opportunity to visit St. Philip Neri and to see the old log cabin that's pretty much preserved now within another building.
Correct.
Why was it important to do that?
Well, as wood and weather, they take a toll on each other, with wood losing. And the idea of this, or the importance of this brick building around the outside of it, is to preserve the log cabin. Because as it is now, unless there's maintenance done on the logs themselves, and as far as varnishing and weatherproofing and all that, they will deteriorate. And they have. And if you come down, you can see the deterioration that was taking place prior to this brick building being put on top of it.
There's, I think, kind of a metaphor there, because while buildings tend to kind of get old and need repair and restoration, in the same way our souls need that same kind of revitalization and restoration as well. And so spiritually, what has this celebration of the 200th anniversary of your parish done for the congregation spiritually?
Made it stronger, give them the will to keep going. In this day and age, when we are short on priests and we don't really have enough priests to go around, because we're actually sharing with 4 other parishes, 1 priest down there. And so it keeps us closer knit, I guess is how I want to answer that.
We're going to take a little break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, because I'd like to talk about that whole collaborative spirit that you find yourself in as a parish, but also really traces its roots back to many, many years. So stay with us. We'll be right back. It was in Dungannon, Ohio, in Columbiana County, that the first group of Catholics settled. St. Philip Neri, the first parish in all northern Ohio, was founded in 1817 under the title of St. Paul's Settlement. It was to visit this settlement that Father Edward Fenwick, the Apostle of Ohio, made his first trip to northern Ohio. 4 years later, Cincinnati was chosen as the see city in the state of Ohio, and Fenwick was selected as the first bishop. Today, St. Philip Neri remains the oldest parish in the Diocese of Youngstown, but it is also one of the smallest. Congratulations, Catholic Diocese, for celebrating 75 years with pride in the past and faith in the future. Miles from the first Catholic parish in all of Ohio, in a place called Canton, Catholics gathered in 1817 to celebrate Mass with Father Fenwick. Because of limited building space, the Mass was held outdoors under a huge oak tree. The spot near the present Church of St. John the Baptist, which was established in 1823 as the second oldest parish in the Diocese of Youngstown. The oak tree grew there until 1906, when it was struck by lightning. To preserve it, the parishioners took the wood and carved a chair out of it, which remains in the church today. In 2012, St. John the Baptist was elevated to a basilica. Congratulations, Catholic Diocese, for celebrating 75 years with pride in the past and faith in the future. Welcome back to our show. I'm talking with Joe McKarns from St. Philip Neri Church. Now, Joe, I think I'd like you to tell us about some of your experiences as a young child in the Diocese of Youngstown and with your parish and with your churches. What do you remember, and what is it that you'd like to highlight for us, especially during this anniversary year?
Well, since we're talking about history, my granddad, Donald T., which would be Father McKarns' dad, he was the youngest of 3 children, and he would take us around in the summertime, in the middle of the week, in the middle of the day, and go water flowers at the various cemeteries. Now, for me, growing up on a farm like that, we didn't get off the farm very much, hardly at all. And in the summertime, a lot of times, the only time you got off the farm was to literally go to church, and occasionally the feed mill. But we always went to church. So for us to get off in the middle of the week, in the middle of the day, in the middle of the summer, to go with Grandpap to water flowers, that was a treat in itself for us kids. And it was kind of a twofold thing. He was watering flowers, but we was to help him because he wasn't getting around too great, but he could do some. But he was passing history down to us without us actually knowing it. And now, because of that, I'm the caretaker, the whatever that takes care of the cemetery down there at Dungannon. So it did pay off. So what I would suggest to a lot of other grandparents, aunts and uncles, to take their kids and take them to the cemetery just to water flowers and visit graves. That's something that I remember very vividly. He didn't really allow us to crawl around on top of the stones too much, but we as kids kind of did a little bit. But it was fun. And when you're working all the time, you need a little bit of fun. So that's why I remember that, and it's probably one of the things I remember most.
Now, it's interesting because when you are talking about that, if we didn't have people like your grandfather and our grandparents and our parents to continue to tell those stories and share that history with us, how it would have been lost, and how important it is for us as family, as communities, and also as church to share those stories and to keep that memory alive. You know, it's almost like, you know, for us as Catholics, when someone that we love has passed away, we remember them by telling stories about them. And so to keep those things alive, it's important for us to share those stories. What were some of the other stories that you remember as we celebrate this anniversary year, in particular of St. Philip Church, that you would like to share with us?
Well, like I said about the cemetery, this is the St. Philip Cemetery that I was talking about. But the other stories is the fact that you would be down either mowing the grass or maintenance work, and people would come driving in. Some would actually just drive in and drive right back out. Why, I don't know, but that's what they did. And others would stop and talk, and then, or want to know some answers to some questions. Well, what I would do then is I would, of course I had the keys, so I would say, well, here, come show you. So I'd show them. So they was thrilled for that. And I just had done a lot of work over the years there, a lot of maintenance work, and these people would come and go, and you never knew when they was coming, all hours of the day and night. And of course, I was there all hours of the day and night. Not that I was continuous, But sometimes you would get a spot in the morning where you go do something, middle of the day or late evening. Been down there after dark before.
As a matter of fact, if I recollect, I'll tell you a story that I remember first meeting you. You probably don't remember, but I think you were cutting grass at St. Philip Neri Church, and this would have been the summer in 2000, if that makes sense. And I had gone there with a priest friend. He had just moved into Columbiana County and was going to be appointed the dean and wanted to know a little bit more about the area. And so we kind of one Friday took a tour of Columbiana County and went to St. Philip. We went over to Summitville, Salineville, went all around, and you were cutting grass, and you actually stopped the mower and talked with us. And I don't know if you remember that. That was 18, 19 years ago, you know. So, but remembering those things and how you had pride in the place and in the parish and in the church, I think speaks volumes. Now, the book that you brought with us today is celebrating the 200th anniversary of St. Philip Neri. What in the book that you brought that you'd like to highlight to tell us about?
Well, there's a lot of things in this book. This has been researched by my girlfriend, Kelly Dorn, Dr. Kelly Dorn. She just got her doctorate degree. And she has a degree in library science. So that enables her to know a few tricks of the trade, so to speak, to find things that's not normally found. I don't know as I have a particular thing in here, but I will tell you that the people, the history people that thought they knew what everything was going on, but they read this, and there's stuff in there that they wasn't aware of.
Sure.
So that tells you that as much as we think we know, there's more. And you know, when you go back 200 years, there's a lot of time span, and there's a lot of stuff that wasn't wrote down, wasn't kept, and thank God for the people that did keep the stuff that they did keep. Because if it wasn't for some of them, just a few, to do that, we wouldn't have near enough stuff to write a book.
Right.
And just a few people like that, it makes a world of difference. Even though when you're doing this, the people that wants to do it and keeps this stuff, even though your children or whatever don't real interested in it, but somewhere along the line, and I've seen this, the grandchildren or the great-grandchildren or a niece or a nephew then becomes interested. Right. But if you have stuff, keep it preserved somewhere.
Right. We're going to talk more about that in a moment, but we're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. It was in Dungannon, Ohio, in Columbiana County, that the first group of Catholics settled. St. Philip Neri, the first parish in all northern Ohio, was founded in 1817 under the title of St. Paul's Settlement. It was to visit this settlement that Father Edward Fenwick, the Apostle of Ohio, made his first trip to northern Ohio. 4 years later, Cincinnati was chosen as a see city in the state of Ohio, and Fenwick was selected as the first bishop. Today, St. Philip Neri remains the oldest parish in the Diocese of Youngstown, but it is also one of the smallest. Congratulations, Catholic Diocese, for celebrating 75 years with pride in the past and faith in the future.
We are in our 7th year at Cristo Rey Jesuit High School. One of the things that's unique about this school is that our kids work 5 days a month at offices in downtown Chicago to pay for their education. We got telephone calls the first day thanking us for sending us those kids to their companies. 95% of our kids are the first ones in their families to finish high school, and 87% of our graduates are in college right now. No one believed that it would be as successful as it is. Well, it's obviously caught on, and we're very, very excited about it.
33 million Americans have descended into poverty. And as their futures fall, so does our nation's.
Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm talking with Joe McKarns. In the book, I know, Joe, if you open up the cover, there's some beautiful photographs of the parish, but also of another photograph. Tell us about those pictures.
The one is a painting. The one's a picture of the church, but the one is a painting that our Knights of Columbus Council commissioned a lady by the name of Marge Blackburn. She's actually a few miles away, but she goes to Summitville. But anyhow, she's kind of an unpublished artist, and doesn't even consider herself as being an artist. But we commissioned her to paint this painting of the log cabin and the current day church, and the midnight mass. That's its title. Was for the purpose of, I guess you asked this earlier, but that was for the purpose of the first Mass being said up in the present day St. Philip Neri Church, was Christmas Midnight Mass in 1849. Now we want to take the log cabin in the front, in the picture, and radiate up into the church at a midnight Mass. Now, this painting, when we commissioned her to do this, is now in New Haven, Connecticut, in the Knights of Columbus Museum as a representative for the whole state of Ohio, which is pretty, and it's in the Knights of Columbus Museum up there is a public museum, so anybody can go up there and see this. It's in the Gallery of States portion of the museum, and there's a lot of things up there, so if you ever do get up there, that would be or anybody, go look, check this out.
Very interesting.
And to know that that's a piece of our Youngstown Diocese history.
Right, exactly.
Clear up there in New Haven, Connecticut.
Sure.
So
I'd like you to talk now about the log cabin.
Okay.
You know, we had a wonderful opportunity when we were there with our film crew to get some wonderful shots of the inside, the outside. Tell us about the log cabin and the significance about it and how they actually used it for a church.
well, the log cabin was actually the home, the house of Daniel and Margaret McAllister. And due to them and the group of McAllisters where this originally was, they opened their home up to be used as a church when the priest would come around and do his sacramental duties of whatever they were or needed. And that's basically how it happened. And used that for approximately 3 years till they built the little brick church of St. Paul's. And then that's how it fit right in there.
Okay.
And then later, as time went on, the parish grew and grew and grew because it was kind of the focal point of the whole area around there at the time. And then the Sandy Beaver and Canal come along, and there's a huge influx of Irish and German people for building the canal, stone cutters and all. And then they had a need to build a bigger church. They knew this, but in building or knowing this, there was a division amongst them whether to build a bigger church where it was at, which was a couple miles out of town there by the cemetery, or build a bigger church in town where it's at now. That divided the congregation.
Sure.
So what happened was the group then that wanted to build in town did, and it's called St. Philip Neri. The other group went over to Summitville, St. John's, and built that church.
Okay.
Now the interesting part about this is the cornerstone was laid on September 10th, 1846. The cornerstone for St. John's in Summitville was laid September the 11th, 1846. Our first Mass in St. Philip's was Christmas Midnight Mass in 1849. Not quite done enough, but it was done enough to have Mass. So that's when they had it.
Interesting.
With the first Mass in St. John's at Summitville in Easter of 1852.
Okay.
So this was a major undertaking back then. And it took time, and you know, people didn't have much money.
Right.
You know, we look at today's standards and think, well, it's cheap. No, it was entirely extremely expensive back then. So, but the log cabin is preserved, and for the 150th anniversary back in 1967, Father Culp, or Monsignor Culp, and a local historian by the name of, I'm lost there.
Not necessary.
But they actually went and found where this log cabin was. And since it was private, they had built, the people had years come, had built around it with a house and kind of tucked it away, hidden it away, until they went and the people at that time, I guess they ended up tearing the house down because it was pretty much hadn't been lived in, and then moved the log cabin from where it was to in where it's at now.
Okay.
For the 150th anniversary. Now here it is, 200 years, log cabin's still there, and we built this protective structure around it.
Yeah. We've got about 2 minutes left of our time together. So what would you like to let the folks know that are with us also about St. Philip Neri and the significance of this old church that really has roots that go back much further than 1817 when you think about it?
Yes. There's a lot of history here. You can see it firsthand. The chest of drawers, or the altar that was used by Father Fenwick in 1817, is still there today.
Yeah.
You know, it's got a little age to it, but it's still a nice looking piece of furniture and still being used today. Bishop Murray has been down. Bishop Murray has actually said Mass with this altar. We took it up to the cemetery one time for a function up there, and he said Mass on it. And also, I want to note too that we have as far as the tours goes, I've taken Bishop Murray on tours before, and he enjoys it very, very much. So these are, what do I call them, high quality tours. So I invite you all to come down, or everybody, and call me ahead of time. And we have a website, and you know, just I guess I'm going to do my best to help preserve this legacy and history as time goes on into the future.
Well, Joe McKarns, we certainly appreciate your presence on our show today for continuing the legacy of St. Philip Neri Church in Dungannon, but also for sharing your life, your faith, your dedication to God. So thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
Spotlight has been a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your program host was Father James Korda.